Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. I am really excited today because I have been able to bring to you an old friend of mine that we have not seen each other for many years, actually. And she was the reason that I essentially got into the program that I did with my holistic health education master's. She was the first class that I took there, and it was kind of my I'm going to try and see how I feel about this place kind of a class, right? And so in taking her class, I was like, yep, I'm in. Let's do this. I'm full speed ahead now. So super happy to have her here because what she does around energy work, and you've heard me talk about energy work so much on the podcast at this point. I think energy work and trauma work are so important and often overlooked when it comes to hormones and health. She's just always been fascinating in her experiences with energy work and how she teaches it. So we're going to talk about all of that today. My guest is Vicki Dello Joio, who is a life-changing workshop leader, key energy master teacher, and inspirational speaker. Since 1975, her brand of brilliance has empowered wellness-motivated and spiritually inclined seekers to infuse body, mind, spirit practices into their very selves so that they can tap into their birthright of joy. Use it as a fuel, not a goal, for a lifetime. In addition, Vicki has drawn from decades of theater performance, directing experience, along with her lifelong study of martial arts to fire up visionary speakers to amplify their charisma and deliver their message with passion, presence, and power. Her methods for both crafting stories and her focus on the energy behind how they are told have touched and transformed hundreds of speakers to stand and deliver with joy, confidence, and ease. Popular host of monthly program Qi Talks and a Hall of Fame recognized teacher of the Chinese art of Qigong by the Association of Women Martial Arts Instructors, Vicki's spiritual fitness program and book, The Way of Joy, has transformed the lives of thousands of participants since 1975. Welcome, Vicki.
Oh, thank you so much, Christine. It's just a joy to see you again. I can't even tell you.
I know, right? It's just, as we were talking about before we got on, it's been so many years now. It's kind of crazy just
I
how time
know.
passes,
It
right?
is crazy. I think it's 20 years since I first met you. So
Yeah.
it's really nuts.
Yeah, right. And then so here we are. And that's, I think, the good thing about, because we sort of reconnected via I guess LinkedIn's a social media way, approach. And that's the good thing about the social media platforms, right? Is that you can reconnect and stay connected with people that at one time, pre 2000 you weren't able to easily do. So
Yes.
so let's start off with just the basics for people that have never heard of Qigong. What is it? What is going on?
Well, it's a great question because there are a lot of people who haven't heard of Qigong still. Qigong is a word. Most people have heard of Tai Chi Chuan or Tai Chi, and some people and Tai Chi is one style of Qigong. So Qigong is a word like dance. It's a very broad word, and it includes many different styles and lineages and philosophies. There's healing Qigong or medical Qigong. There's spiritual Qigong. There's intellectual Qigong. There's a whole bunch of different types. It's martial arts style of Qigong. Tai Chi would fall under that category. So it's a word that came up in the 50s, I think, or late 40s, basically to encapsulate all of these different lineages and practices that focus on breath, visualization, and movement. So whether that's internal movement through visualization or literally moving your body, and we sort of put that all under the cap of Qigong. So again, it's a fairly new word to describe ancient practices. And there's over 6,000 was the last I heard, over 6,000 exercises that get called Qigong. So you could study with one teacher for years and learn everything they had to teach, and then go somebody else and do entirely different practices. What they do have in common is most of Qigong is based on Taoist concepts or Taoist principles. And so it's working a lot with how to be in flow, how to, be adaptable in your life, how to be empowered and have a sense of agency over how your body works.
And as you were talking, I was thinking about how those concepts have become so pertinent and available, I think, in our culture now, even when it's not called Qigong, right? Like it's this idea of visualization, this idea of breath work, and maybe our science, our allopathic science, is kind of catching up with these ancient traditions that many, different cultures understood how important they were for long periods of time. And we're just kind of in Western culture, catching up with that now. But I think that's such a, a beautiful encapsulation of these things that are part of the human spirit, right? That we're just starting to
Absolutely.
see how important they are.
Yeah, well, it's super exciting because I think that there's a way in which that split between science and spirituality, or a sense of what is underneath, what's driving us, what makes us who we are, that's all starting to kind of come together, because it feels like an artificial split that happened for whatever reason long ago, at least in Western culture. And now that it's coming together through everything from quantum physics to functional medicine to various types of approaches to who are we here, we humans on this planet, or we living beings on this planet, and what is that made of, is become more and more unified over time. And I think that's just the direction we're going, is a kind of healing an ancient split that doesn't really belong there.
Right. And I think we're partially getting there because the other things that we were doing weren't working to really make us healthy, because you can't have a split, right? And actually be holistic and truly healthy. And so I think one of the positive things, if you want to call it that came out of COVID was, I think a lot of people started to come around maybe to these concepts. I think it was already building, but then that just gave some time and some ability for people to kind of learn about different things than they had before, and also understand how much stress impacts our daily life and our health, and that we need other ways of dealing with stress than sort of these just things that we've been using that haven't really been all that helpful, or kind of just blunt stress.
That's so true. And I think that's, I think that's part of, it's almost like there's a new paradigm that we're living in now, right? Because there's no going back to pre-COVID, even though people are going out more now, and the strains of COVID don't seem as severe. There's still a sense that we've opened up a different way, right? Definitely more in the virtual world, or what my friend Solala calls cyber DAO. But really, that there's this sense that, okay, well, how do we navigate connection now? And that's something that's really, really interesting to me, because it's like, what is it that connects us? And I think that there's a possibility here of building something new that can go beyond where we were even before the pandemic.
Absolutely, 100%. So how did you find yourself learning about Qigong in the first place?
Learning about Qigong. Okay. My first encounter with it was a Tai Chi class I took when I was in a theater program, that they brought in Tai Chi for actors. So this is a long time ago. This is like in the late 60s, late 60s or early 70s. And they, at first I wasn't sure what this thing was. I didn't particularly relate to the teacher. I didn't feel it was a Chinese master teacher, but he came in, and I was just, his big claim to fame was that he had a younger wife who, he was really old. He was maybe 60. He was younger than I am now.
At the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was a teenager, but he had a wife, and recently they'd had a baby. And so his big, it was this big, see how virile Tai Chi made him, and virility was not of any interest to me at all.
So, you're like, I'm good, thanks.
Right. But when I started doing the Tai Chi and started doing the movement, it was like coming home. It was like, it was almost like I was learning this, but remembering it at the same time. I was just like, felt so right. So that was my first introduction to this whole world of Tai Chi and Qigong. And then I continued it when I started going to college, and did that. After a while, I started doing more of the fighting arts, the martial arts that were more for self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
And then came back to Qigong after an incident that I heard you tell my story on another podcast. And
Yep.
I was like, oh my gosh, she tells that so well. She really
Oh.
got it. She heard it. You know?
Good.
And I know
I'd love for you to share it now. I think it's so amazing. Obviously, it's stuck with me for many, many years.
Well, I was so impressed. So yeah, I was in a martial arts school. I was learning Kempo, which is really a fighting art that draws together 5 different arts in order to really learn how to defend yourself. It was created by 5 martial arts masters to help street fighting in Hawaii, help people take care of themselves in Hawaii. But anyway, I was studying this art, and there's a lot of sparring and fighting in it. And I was fighting a lot at the time with my partner, who I was breaking up with. And so she and I would be fighting at home. And then for some reason, our teacher thought it was a great idea to have us fight with one another at the school. So we would be kicking and punching. It was not a happy time in my life.
No.
But I had started it because I wanted to learn to defend myself. I had had some attacks on the street in the past. So one day I was coming home from the school, I was taking the subway BART here in California from the school back to my home. And as I was walking home from the BART station, this guy walked around the corner. And you know how you can sometimes, I think most women are very alert to, there can be some energy that you feel is funky, or you can feel something feels menacing. So he came around the corner, and I just, my antennae went up. But I didn't go into any kind of fighting stance where I was ready to kick or punch him. I just did something instinctively where I just got a little taller. And as he came up to me, he reached out to grab me. And as he reached out to grab me, his hand bounced about 6 inches or a foot from actual contact with my body. And I knew he hadn't missed because he walked away looking at his hand and then looking at me and looking at his hand and looking back at me like, what happened?
Yeah.
So I didn't even know what happened. It wasn't until I got home and I got a phone call from somebody who became my first big Qigong teacher, who was calling to say, I don't think you need to learn these fighting arts anymore. I think you need to focus on some of these internal arts like Qigong. And she had been just doing that off of a chart that she'd read about me.
Wow.
So I started studying Qigong and learned that the name for this thing that happened was an actual, real, palpable field that's called Wei Qi. It has to do with external energy, and in Chinese medicine it has to do with Wei Qi has to do with your protective energy, like what keeps you from, you know, your immune system from pathogens and allergens and that kind of thing. But there's an actual field that you can start to play with that expands and contracts according to what you want. And it's the same type of energy that when somebody comes to a party or something like that, and you sort of are drawn to them, or you're sort of repelled, like I think that person to pass, that has to do with this energy that's emitting from them, even though whether you believe in energy, so-called energy or not, it's there. We read that in each other instinctively.
Right. And, you know, I mean, this is just something that came to my head. It's an interesting approach too for women. You know, I have long thought, oh, I need to take some self-defense classes, you know, because I'm not trying to carry a gun. I'm not trying to do any of these things. And so I've always kind of thought self-defense classes, but there's a kind of a part of me that just, it's such a masculine thing that I'm not necessarily drawn to doing it. And so as you were talking, you know, I don't want to masculinize or feminize any of this stuff, but the Wei Qi almost sounds like a little bit more of a feminine approach, right? It's like you're utilizing your own energy as a protective field where you don't have to like necessarily come at somebody,
right?
You know,
right.
And I could be completely off, but I was just like, oh, that's so powerful that you were just aware, you were using your intuition, which
Yes.
I think, you know, so many women and cycling people really have a deep connection to, but may be disconnected for whatever reason. And then from that place, you were extending your energy as a protection mechanism.
Yeah, instinctively. And I think the thing is that, you know, with women, I think we've also, there's something about Wei Qi that has to do with really having agency, owning your own power, right? To be able to stand, because basically what I did was I remember I had this thought that as my spine lengthened and I just stood really tall, and I remember having this thought, I am. And when I started to really explore more with Wei Qi, particularly now I've been teaching it for so long, and had so many students report amazing experiences with it, that I think that there's something that with women, I think in terms of the gender piece of it, we tend to be trained out of it and trained out of sort of that owning your power, being aligned between, you know, what roots you and what inspires you, and being able to express that with a play from a place of passion and power. To be able to do that is something that, at least in my generation, was definitely scolded, right? Was frowned upon. My father was a perfect example of somebody who was like, you know, you should, you know, I remember one time I was visiting him and his wife was asking me about some of the work I did. And I was telling her, and she was saying, this is great stuff, Vicki. You should tell people about this all the time. And my father turned to her and he said, no, you know what I love about her? She never talks about herself. And I remember thinking at the time, thank you so much for saying that, because now I realize where that came from. So there's something about, and I think that many women, and I think, you know, women who are in different generation than me are sort of standing on the shoulders of the work that women did before that in the women's movement and so forth, to be able, or white women's movement, I should say, to be able to really, you know, own that. So I think there is a piece of it that's genderized that I hadn't even thought about, but that when a woman stands in her power, it can be incredible.
And it's palpable. Just as it's just as powerful as
it's just as powerful as a punch in the jaw.
Right, exactly. You know, and I think
and you don't hurt your hand doing it.
exactly. And I do think that's a huge piece of what we're, you know, facing and dealing with right now, is how does the feminine rise within her power or their power, you know, in order to help balance this world that has been, you know, so far in one direction for so long, you know. And to me, it's not about, you know, the feminine taking over and suppressing the men like it has been, or the masculine as you know it's been, but that really just a rebalancing, you know, that we are hopefully I always like to believe that we're in the process of that happening, even if not all the things that you see on the news every day feel like that, but you know, the wider circle. So
there's a rise in that type of consciousness, I think, and I think it's necessary, right? Is we need to have that balance, and we need to have that sooner rather than later. And it's a new paradigm, so one that's based in patriarchy or white supremacy. That feels to me like it's kind of, I mean, it's certainly more bold and bald than it's been in the past, but it also feels like there's more and more consciousness rising that says, no, we can do another way. We can have a collective, you know, if you want to go, you know, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go with that African proverb, if you want to go with others, you know, if you want to go far, go with others. That concept of how are we interconnected to really recognize that we are all part of a consciousness, a planet, you know, that sort of we are all one consciousness is, you know, and I'm watching more and more men embrace that part of themselves, what they call the feminine, you know, and for me, it's this, you know, this is this yin and yang, which I've never really liked genderizing those two concepts, but has to do with the balance of what our internal world is with what we're creating in our external world.
Absolutely. So you've continued to do Wei Qi and Qigong, essentially. I mean, I know Qigong is kind of the umbrella term, but all of these years since then, I think that's just an amazing, there's not many people that stick to many things for that long a period of time. What do you think has made you really, you know, stay with it for this long?
What a great question. You know, it's one of those things that happens in cycles that I fall in love with it again and again. So there's different things that have happened in my life. Like I remember when I was first training myself to be a teacher, which I was doing 2.5 to 3 hours of very intensive practices a day, so that I would be able to sustain what I thought was important to sustain as a Qigong teacher, and what I was being led to through the teacher that I had at the time. And I was also very stressed in my life at that time. There was a lot going on. I remember I got hit by a car, and while I was walking across the street, I got thrown up in the air. Have I told you that story?
No, I don't think those.
So,
I know this one.
so I was walking across the street. This car hit me. I remember looking over my shoulder, seeing that I thought it came to a stop sign, and then I just kept walking. I was jaywalking, I have to confess. And then I looked over my shoulder again, and he was coming in at me really fast, and it was about 30 miles an hour.
Wow.
I got thrown many, many feet up in the air. And in that moment of being thrown up in the air, I had this moment where time stopped. You know, just same way that time slows down for people who've had car accidents and stuff like that. For me, it was like I was up in the air, time stopped. And I remember literally looking around. It was like I was a seed inside of a hull. And I was looking around at the inside of my body and going, wow, I really am just a seed in this hull. And I can choose to stay or I can choose to leave. What do I want to do?
Wow.
And it was not a given that I wanted to stay, because I was struggling with some depression and some issues that were going on for me. And I decided to stay, obviously, and I opened my eyes and I was coming down to the pavement, and I just tucked into a Aikido roll, basically, and I just rolled out of it. And then I stood up and I started to do some Qigong, and the guy leaped out of his car. He was like, "What are you doing? Lie down. I just hit you. Lie down."
You're like, this is going to take care of it. Okay, let me do my thing.
I lay down and I just started doing it internally. And, I ended up going, they took me to the hospital, and just, I was twisted, but nothing was broken. I remember the people standing around, the doctors and nurses, going, from that double impact of it being hit at that speed and then hitting the pavement that hard, she should be dead or broken.
Yeah.
I was fine. I walked out. I was twisted. Wow. It took me years to untwist my spine to the degree that I needed to. But the bottom line is that that's when I fell in love with Qigong again, because it was like I realized it was this energy practice that first of all made me that resilient. Second of all, allowed me to slow time down to kind of make that choice. Also helped me in terms of the reflex action of going into a role. There was a lot about Qigong, that what I'd learned through and from Qigong. So that's just one time. I have many, many instances where it just came back around. And then after a certain point, it became watching what happens for my students, because that's really, for me, where the rubber hits the road. It's like, all fine for me to have, these experiences, whatever. But when I see my students really, and I have students who've studied with me, some of them for 25 or 30 years. I've been doing this for a long time. And I, like, why do you keep coming back? And they said, because you keep renewing how you're doing it. So I keep people's attention, but it's really seeing everything from people just owning their power in a whole new way, being able to use these Qi practices to really accelerate what they're doing in a way that feels less effort and more results. They're so rewarding to watch that even if I didn't have a practice myself, I'd still want to be able to help people that way. It's very gratifying. So I think that's what it is. And at this point, it's just a habit.
It's
I get up, I do my Qigong.
Yeah, you're like, it's deep in there. Well, I was thinking about, I think probably some of the popularity of some of the martial arts movies are basically what you explained and what happened to you, right? Was that you were able to, you weren't manipulating anything, but you were able to work with the situation because of this thing that was already deeply embedded in you, right? It's not, that wouldn't have happened probably that way had you not done all of this.
I was in such a deep practice at that time.
Right.
And it was almost like that. It was like a kick in the butt, literally, because I got hit on the side of my hip, but kick in the butt because I was sort of overextended, stressed, and depressed. And so this was a moment that, happened, a serendipitous type of moment that did not harm me in a long-term way, and that actually redirected how I started to think about what my life was going to look like and what I was going to do next. It was one of those,
those moments. And I can certainly relate, just with my, fibroid surgery gone wrong story, and how that, redirects what I did with my life and sort of got me going, gave me the shove to redirect. But I also was thinking about, I don't know if you remember Bhaskar. He was also at JFK.
Remember the name?
Yeah, I was like, Bhaskar, how can you forget that name, right?
Yeah.
But he at one point I don't know if he walked the entire length of the country or width of the country, but he walked quite a bit, right? He did this for, I don't know, a year or two. And I remember him telling a story of, being somewhere out in the woods, and he was just walking along, and basically he just like jumped up and then landed on the ground. He didn't even realize why he had jumped. He didn't do it consciously, and he looked back and there was a snake right there.
Wow.
So, it's the power of really connecting to your body too, and getting into, I think, the practices that really bring us back to our bodies,
Yes.
and really, deepen that relationship, where so much of, unfortunately, in our culture is kind of splitting that relationship. Yeah. And particularly, with a lot of the women that I work with, we have a deep disconnection, unfortunately, from our bodies, because we live in a culture that's like push, 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 do all the things, handle all the things, hustle. The hustle culture was so big there for a little while before COVID kicked in, and there's still remnants, that I see. And so we miss all those signals.
Well,
Right?
also it's change your body, right? There's this
Yeah.
constant thing of like your body's not okay, especially
Yes.
for women, right? You're got to be this weight, you've got to be this shape, you've got to be, you've got to
Yep.
fit this particular false ideal that
Ideal.
doesn't really exist.
Yep.
There's a lot of pressure in that way. And I see that even still with young women. It makes me so sad to, and now that I'm an old person, I don't have the same level of like, frustration around my body. But there's, and the thing is that our bodies, the very cells of our bodies have such wisdom that when we can tap in. That's what I love about Qigong. It's really following the wisdom of your body. It was that wisdom that when we really listen in, that can change everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny, I actually just did a social media post, I think, on Instagram about what you're saying. One of the things in the past few years around the woman's body ideal has been, it's like being more curvy and having a bigger booty and all of that. And apparently now 90s heroin chic is what they call it, is coming back in style. And so the super skinny thing, I guess, that was happening in the 90s. And I did a little screaming post, is what I like to call it, because I'm like, at what point can we see the manipulation here, and even when we were accepting curvier bodies and bigger booties, that was only creating an ideal that not everyone can fit into. None of these ideals are any that majority of people can fit into, right?
And they're harmful.
And they're harmful, and they're going to try and sell you products to make
Right.
you that way. Now, plastic surgery on a whole different level, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's just, it's really incredible, the mental, physical, emotional things that were put through by trying to get this ideal. So I was in that mood when I posted.
I'm going to go on Insta right after our podcast and listen to you with pleasure.
I'm like, we got to step out of the insanity, right? Leave them to try and create that, and just step out and just be in your body as it is right now. And I love what you're speaking to, because it shows all the beauty and power and, just loving connection that you can build when you start to do these practices, and without a doubt, the energy level has such a huge impact on our hormones. I say energy and trauma are the probably biggest overlooked things when it comes to our hormones. And those are often very interlinked too, right?
Yes.
Because that hidden trauma, sort of impacts us on these energetic levels that we don't even realize.
Right. Those traumas hold in our bodies as stagnation, right?
Yeah.
And what we want to do is get that to move.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so what a powerful, practice something like Qigong is, to even, you don't have to necessarily tap into that trauma, right? It's just you're moving that energy that has been stagnated, and that can have such a huge impact on your reproductive system, because not only is it trauma, from this lifetime, but it's ancestral trauma. And if you believe in past lives, it's that trauma too, right? And so utilizing these practices are just much more powerful, I think, than a lot of people realize.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the other thing that you do, and you really bring your energy practices into supporting this. And this is working with people to get up there, do the speaking, do the presentations, tell their story. So tell us what that's all about.
Well, this is something that came to me because I was back in around 2013. I decided to take my Qigong teaching more seriously as a quote business unquote. It is, I just sort of had followed the flow unfolding, and it had worked well for me. But I wanted to go to a new level, so I began speaking a lot on stages because I have this big background also in theater and in directing. It was very easy for me to make that transition. A lot of times I'd be on stage with other speakers, and when I see the other speakers speak, I'd notice that they would be losing their audience. And I remember one time I gave a talk. It was, got great responses, and a nice line of people afterwards wanting to talk to me. Somebody came up to me and said, "I love how you tell stories and how you speak. Can you teach me to be more like you?" And I said, "No, but I can teach you how to be more like you in a way that really makes the kind of impact that you know you're born to make." So I started classes. At the time, I called it rock star speaking and storytelling, not because I wanted people to be rock stars, but because, but because when you're at a rock concert, you can feel your bones vibrate, right? Because of the volume. And I wanted to have the level of impact of people's stories, to have that bone moving, that it would create that kind of bone moving response in people, to really get people motivated and moving, whether it's towards a call to action for people who are platform speakers who are speaking to earn money or bring people into their programs, or keynote speakers who are really wanting to inspire people to take action about something or another. So I started to work with the storytelling, especially the storytelling part, and since then it's developed. I call it now your power presence, because what I realized that it all boiled down to communication. And to me, there's 4 elements or 4 pillars that are really important to address, especially if you're going to be on a live or virtual stage speaking, which is, what is your message, right? What are the stories that carry that message in a way that's succinct and clear, that doesn't have too many details or too little details, which sometimes it's hard to know. Right? Because it's hard to see the picture when you're inside the frame, right? You need to have an outside eye. And then the delivery, how are you delivering it? And then finally, what's the energy behind it all? So I've sort of taken these 4 pillars, and I work with speakers and speakers of all kinds. Also, I've worked with, lawyers presenting to the Supreme Court, all the way to people speaking, at a women's march to thousands of people, to people speaking in a boardroom or a court, or speaking from a stage about their business. So working with people, everybody's a speaker, right? We're all speaking, unless you're mute for some reason. So it's like, how do we really elevate that? Because I really believe that speaking and telling stories is vital for anybody to move towards you. I think of stories as being the vehicle to empathy. Like Maya Angelou once said that people will often forget what you said or what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And I think stories are the way you help people know the feeling connection, that they get to know you, like, trust, that important factor for all entrepreneurs. It really stems from what is it that you're telling yourself about yourself, and what are you telling others about yourself. So I started power presence, individualized programs for people to, and so I work with people who are like, got a big TED talk coming up, or some kind of big, vital, important thing coming up, all the way to people who are just thinking, you know what, I think I need to speak more to build my business. I have different levels of programs that I work with folks. And I use Qigong as part of it. Qigong informs everything that I do, right? It's part of, I've been doing it for so long. That it comes through, and I do have the people who are open to it practice some of the basic, easy to learn, quick to learn practices, particularly right before they step on a stage or step into a Zoom meeting, so that they can really be there in their full present, and most shiny self.
Yeah. Well, and I think we are in a time, right, where there's a lot of talk about authenticity. and owning your story, right? And that's how you sort of stand out. You know, I was actually just having a conversation with one of my colleagues because, you know, it may not feel like this to the outside world necessarily, but you know, we're just like, man, there's a lot of like functional medicine people these days, right? And on social media and in these different places, you're trying to kind of figure out, well, how do I stand out from the crowd, you know, because it's getting oversaturated. And I mean, that's what we came back to, right? It's telling your story, it's owning your story. And what you said too about one of the main points that you work on, I mean, for me, it can be so hard to determine what is too much in the details and what is too little in the details, right? And I can hear it when other people are presenting or, you know, telling their story, or like, oh, they got it, you know, or yeah, that was a little excessive, you know, versus in yourself, you're just like, I don't know what's going to hit.
Yeah. And that's so true from a lot of people who I get to work with, is, you know, they come and they're just not sure. And I, you know, to tell you the truth, I always use a director when I'm formulating something new. I want to see what's landing and what isn't. So it's good to have that outside eye, because I think with the detail piece, especially, which is, you know, like I said, is so common, that a lot of speakers that I've seen end up, you know, when they're in their about me part of their talk, of their, say, their signature talk, they go so much into, like, it's like a reciting their resume, or, you know, I did this and then I did that and then this happened and then I did that. And so they're describing something, but they're not really feeling it, and neither is their audience. Or they get so lost in the weeds of the details that they forget to come back to the essence of what they're trying to say.
Like, that's probably more me. It's just like, oh, well, and then this happened, and then this happened. And you're like, all right, we got to make that a little more succinct for sure.
Well, yeah, to have that core thread, know how to weave that through is really useful.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking about too, when you were talking about, you know, doing exercises before going on stage. I mean, I can think about that in the, you know, the times that I've faced that, but even talking to friends that have done TED Talks and things like that, you know, I mean, that is when the rubber meets the road, right? Is when, you know, all of the sort of practice comes to a head when you get on that stage, and it's just a big light on you, and you know, you can't even really see the audience, but you know all these people are there, and your mind just wants to go blank, you know. And so you know, I know that there's lots of different sort of approaches, and there's different hormones essentially that are at play during all of this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, neuropeptides going nuts.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously your cortisol and your adrenaline are just like shooting through the roof, you know. So it's like, how can you work with that, right, to channel it? And I used to teach dance, and this is what I would tell my students all the time too, is, you know, taking that, what can feel like fear and nervousness, and channeling it into the opposite, which is excitement, and being able to really, you know, hone in on that aspect.
Well, that reminds me of that wonderful Fritz Perls quote, that fear is excitement without breath. Have you heard that?
Oh, I haven't heard that. No. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and translating that stage fright into excitement is a really good way. And of course, Qigong is really helpful for that, right? Because it's all about breathing and coming back to center, so that when you walk on stage, you're back aligned, instead of, you know, what if they don't like me? What if things get caught in. And
it is fascinating too, right? Because the body's kind of set up in this mode of wanting to protect you, right? That's why all of these hormones are being released, and everything's kind of going crazy inside, because it's like, we may have to run or fight or any of those things, right? So it's like, you have to figure out how to downshift, maybe, is a way of looking at it, you know. And I can see how Qigong really can help with that, you know, those energetic practices. So beautiful. Well, let people know how they can contact you and work with you.
Well, the best thing that I would suggest is to go to yourpowerpresence.com, because there people can they can reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you. But you can also download my free book called Let's Get Real About Charisma: 3 Keys to Inspire and Motivate Your Audience Every Time You Speak. That's what I call it. And I geared it towards speakers, but I have a lot of people who've downloaded it because they find that it's useful in terms of how to communicate in a way that's non-defensive and clearly in their power when they're having high stakes conversations, whether it's with a colleague, a boss, an employee who's being difficult, or a kid or a grandkid who you need to set boundaries with. They're finding that some of these techniques are actually helping them when they're just about to have that kind of high stakes conversation. But it's certainly useful for those of us who spend a lot of time on stage.
Yeah, very cool. That's a wonderful offering. Thank you for doing that for people.
I'm very proud of it. It's pretty much hot off the presses. So I
good.
This book, and I've been getting such wonderful feedback, not just from people who enjoyed it, but from other speakers. So that feels very validating.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah,
they're like, oh yeah, that's important information.
It's a different approach than the general speaking, presenting types of coaching. So
that's great. And then if people want to do Qigong with you or Wei Qi with you, do you have some offerings too?
The Qigong classes, yes, absolutely. I have something. I do seasonal workshops. So there's one coming up at the end of March. The best way to find out about that is to either reach out to me directly through that Your Power Presence, or to go to my website, which is my name, VickiDelloJoio.com. And that always has pop-ups of what the latest classes and workshops are coming up.
Nice. Perfect. Do you have a newsletter too that people can sign up for?
Yeah. If you download the ebook, you'll get the newsletter.
Gotcha.
And if you don't want to be on my email list after you get it, you can just unsubscribe. I'm a big believer in eliminating spam of all kinds. So
I hear you. I'm the same way.
Spam for you, please take yourself off the list.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm the same way. I'm like, don't take it personal if I do it to anybody else, and I won't take it personal if you get off my list. I get it,
Yeah, because we're all inundated, right? We're inundated with
that bandwidth.
Yeah,
it's like getting smaller. So, well, this was such a beautiful conversation. I so enjoyed catching up with you and just talking through all these things, and I'm really glad that you got to share that story that I remembered from almost or 20 years ago, and then some other powerful stories, because I know that some of the listeners are going to be very excited, and and I just kind of want to hammer in that point, how much it can help with hormonal dysregulation and irregularities too. It is a very powerful practice when it comes to that.
Yeah, it balances so much, especially within the hormones. I think that's right. And I'm so glad that you're highlighting and bringing focus to that piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so good seeing you.
It's totally an honor to connect with you again, Christine. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, you guys, I will see you next week.